I think a lot of predatory structures have creeped into crypto. What they did is these launchpads kind of set up and became these bull market vehicles for hype and for flipping, and lost their reputation, and crypto was the opportunity for really this new system that really fought against, traditional unfair structures. That's how I see the ideal state of a launchpad, is actually a very strategic piece that helps to bring liquidity into new projects, bring users into new projects, and bring kind of connections into new projects.
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning back into the Bare Metal Podcast. This is Ship the Code from RoccoX Labs, and today I've got here with me Simon Chadwick of EclipseFi. Curious to hear all about it. Welcome, Simon.
Hey legends, how's it doing? How's it going?
I was trying to understand what EclipseFi is, and before we get into all that, it does a bunch of stuff. Can you tell us how you came to build something like EclipseFi? How did you get into crypto? What's the origin story?
I'm going to give you a short because this goes way back, but I've been in crypto since 2016. I have some funny stories, some war stories from the bull market, from the multiple cycles, from getting liquidated on trading on BitMEX to, having a pretty decent portfolio and then having it come down and then disappearing to the Himalayas for a month to hope that my portfolio was going to go back up, and finding that hadn't happened. So I got some war stories, been around for a while, seen the ups and the downs, and felt it all. Went through DeFi summer. I really loved DeFi from the very start. I always loved DeFi. It was a huge, I think I've always had like an inner rebel inside me, like this, the underdog supporter, the person that was always going for the losing team, always, even as a kid watching the news, and it's always like the struggle of the of the oppressor versus the oppressed, right? There was always this kind of like theme going on, and I think for me, like, that really triggered this, like, the people's rebellion. That was like the big thing, right? And DeFi to me felt like, and crypto was the opportunity for really this new system that really fought against, traditional unfair
Standing
structures.
up community managed infra, right?
Right. And funny enough, though, now we feel, and this is something I'll touch on a bit later, like part of my message now comes into like, we're sort of rebuilding these structures. These structures are starting to kind of creep into Web3. And now, so it's like we're on a very fine line, right? Where it's like, I'm not so much talking about governments or these sort of things. It's kind of like these Web2 kind of incumbent systems are being rebuilt. So it's interesting. But I kind of went through DeFi summer. I actually got very interested in Terra, and Terra was, even though, things went the way they did, it really spoke to me a lot, because it really fed to that narrative of like, if we're going to build a decentralized system, like, we really need decentralized money. And, USD, even though the model wasn't perfect, like, there was that, but there was also like the dApps building on Terra were beautiful. The way that like it was just kind of positioned was great. And so I got involved in the Terra ecosystem and actually started working with a protocol there. And I actually pitched this idea of this learn to earn and quest sort of platform to TFL, and they ended up funding this program. I ended up building the education for the Terra ecosystem. It was about $1.8 million they were spending towards videos, high quality animated videos, was working with all the projects in the ecosystem, had built out these really high quality animated videos. If you ever saw those old Terra animated videos, it was like that. And they were going to get shown in the stadium and everything. And then, Terra collapsed. And at the time, I'd been also working with a DeFi protocol that wasn't making the best decisions. It was interesting. Like, I was pushing it really hard, but it was really hard that I came in kind of late. I was like not a co-founder, but I was sort of a late kind of core team member, and I couldn't get the change that I needed to get. And so it was always going down a certain direction, and I was frustrated because I was working ridiculous and I couldn't get it to move in that direction. So, when the Terra collapse happened, there was an opportunity for me to take over a platform on Terra they'd been building and kind of just sort of thrown in the towel. And I got to take over this Launchpad that was building on Terra and bring it to the Cosmos ecosystem. And that was painful, right? Like, in so many ways that, like, I should have definitely stepped back and gone and built something by myself and not overtaken a platform that inherits its own debt and its own, it already raised from investors and lost all that money. It was just funny because it was interesting. But I was stubborn. I just wanted to do my own thing, and I wanted to branch away and kind of get in control. And there was an opportunity in Cosmos to build a platform for launching tokens, because at the time it was kind of on the tail end of airdrop fatigue. There was a lot of protocols that were like talking about like, raising funds and IDOs and launches and stuff. And so I saw an opportunity, but the market timing was really bad. And actually, the market was getting worse. And, I was struggling to raise. I managed to raise from some angels, reposition, rebrand, but I was in a world of pain where I just spent this bear market trying to push and build this launchpad in Cosmos of all places, right? Which had the app chain thesis on the way up and then sort of kind of fizzled off, and then FTX and everything. And it was like the worst protocol to build in a bear market. Like a launchpad is just the worst in a bear market. But I was super stubborn, and I spent all this time literally just BDing, building relationships, building partnerships, building community, doing like literally everything to push the thing forward. And you went through all the pain cycles and all the learnings and lessons and learned so much about that industry, and actually then end up coming at the other end of that. And so it's just a very powerful message of like grit. But that was my story behind like the initial stages of Eclipse. But I always had a very powerful vision, and we can touch on that in a bit, of like, why was I building this? Like, it started off overtaking a platform and then built into so much more. There was like a lot of like, there's a pain point in this industry.
Yeah, I'm super interested in that. So can you tell us sort of like, so Launchpad, you say Launchpad, like break it down. What are the things a Launchpad does? What's your vision for this Launchpad? What could it be? Let's dig into that.
So think about like a few things, right? Like think about, I like to kind of take a few different components. I think it's about the strategic positioning of a launchpad within an ecosystem, right? Like you take a chain's got dApps building on top of the chain. They're maybe individual builders or they're building their own apps. They still need to be able to distribute their tokens in a specific way. They still need to be able to raise capital. Maybe the chain is supporting with introductions, but maybe they need access to like centralized exchanges, or they need access to VCs. They need access to all these things, right? So there's that component. Then you've got VCs and other parties. They were looking for deal flow. Even communities looking kind of for access opportunities into projects. They're looking for projects that maybe they want to research, they want to hear about, they want to kind of get involved with. And then you kind of have like then the token event, like the token distribution generation event, which is finding the price discovery for the token, getting the token out of the market, getting exposure on the token. And so in an ideal world, the Launchpad is the thing that actually ties a lot of this stuff together. It's the strategic piece that can actually be the place to get deal flow. It can be the place to find new opportunities. It can be the place to support builders, to distribute tokens, to essentially bootstrap liquidity. And so that's how I see the ideal state of a launchpad, is actually a very strategic piece that helps to bring liquidity into new projects, bring users into new projects, and bring kind of connections into new projects. What it's turned into, or what it currently is very detached from that. But that still doesn't take away from the fact that in an ideal state, that can be the perfect state for a launchpad. And they can be a very powerful...
Why do you say it's detached from that? That's super interesting.
I think the intentions... So I think the incentives have become misaligned. I think a lot of people have taken the shortcuts. It's very hard to do that well. Like doing that well and actually taking the brunt of DD and taking the brunt of community building and marketing and all sorts of stuff is very challenging. And within that, there's also the opportunity to cut corners and sell something different. And what's ended up happening, I think, with a lot of launchpads is you've seen a lot of marketers come along and kind of take advantage of that positioning and go, okay, we're going to take a short road and we're going to market projects that maybe aren't as good, or we're just going to focus on flipping and create this kind of environment for, and that was birthed out of a bull market as well, where things were moving so fast, people didn't care about DD or anything. They're just like, hey, this is the opportunity for 100Xs. So what they did is these launchpads kind of set up and became these bull market vehicles for hype and for flipping, and lost their reputation, and kind of like this became the model and kind of self-reinforced and trained that this is the way that things are done. There were other kind of ways. Like CoinList was established a lot longer ago, and it's kind of for much bigger protocols. It's hard to get to. Fjord Foundry was a great tool for permissionless launches, but is also limited to LBPs, and it's still a really good tool in its own right. But there's sort of kind of regular launchpad. When you think launchpad, you think that reputation has kind of been tarnished a little bit about like specific actors or marketers that were really good in the industry at doing a specific thing, but not really fulfilling that role of what an ideal launchpad looks like. So that's, I think, when I talk about the detachment, I think a launchpad can be very, very powerful as a tool, but I don't think it's been wielded that well. And I think we're currently seeing a giant pain point in the market that a lot of people are talking about. You're seeing this all over Twitter around this pain point around token distribution and launches, which is still a massive issue in the industry. It's not fully resolved, and I think there's some ground.
Airdrops are not specific enough. They don't really distribute well. It's been established many times. They're not that useful.
I think the other thing is predatory actors. I think the other thing is like this ties into launchpads and sexes and market makers and VCs. I think a lot of predatory structures have creeped into crypto, right? And so we're seeing this with this tier 1 VC game of like, low float, high FDV launchers. This is what everyone's talking about right now. Like these airdrops are being launched at high valuations. The people don't have access anymore, which is like the concept of crypto is the access for the people, like removing the intermediaries. And suddenly we build a structure where everyone's not got access. Launchpads are extracting from builders, like really putting builders into like either launching not good builders or putting builders into tough positions and really dumping on retail. Sexes are not great, like they're terrible for that. Market makers, everything is kind of set in that, and people are screaming for something different. And I think there's opportunity for change in here. And as you said with airdrops, there's opportunity for something better. Not that airdrops are bad, just something that consolidates everything together around that. So yeah.
So is this what you're moving toward with EclipseFi? You want to fix this problem. That's the problem you're seeing as the key to address now. So how are you guys, addressing these points? I mean, why don't you say, for example, it's easy to say, oh, we'll only launch good projects. Like, where do you find those, right? In a quantity that's sufficient to sustain a project like a Launchpad. So how are you guys approaching these things? What are the core values you're coalescing around?
It's a great question. So in terms of high quality projects, there's high quality projects at different tiers. And this is actually a challenging issue in its own right, because there's high quality projects that are tier 1s and there's high quality projects that are tier 3s, right? It might be an ecosystem project that's actually really good for what it is, but they're different, raising at different valuations and they're different standing to like a paradigm backed L1. And those are very hard to launch next to each other because they need different things, right? They're different stages, they're different valuations. So we've identified that, and we know that like this needs to be broken into tiers. And so at Eclipse, like one of the big things that we're wanting to roll out, that we're working on, is having like a flagship platform and then having a more permissionless platform with more community creation. So one of them is like kind of handling more kind of volumes, and the other one is more handling kind of like these bigger projects that maybe L1s or L2s or kind of bigger back projects that can kind of go through heavier DD. And kind of command a bigger standing, but be a little bit more exclusive and a bit more kind of the forefront. The permissionless pad is something that we're working on, like community curation and ways that how do we improve community creation. But the idea of that is like, how do we bring more volume? How do we, like, for example, go into an ecosystem like Neutron that wants to have like maybe there's 5 ecosystem projects that maybe aren't at the size for us to be able to bring them into the flagship pad, but maybe they're great in this aspect and they can bootstrap community. So that's one element. The second element of like how we change this, I think there's a few ways of doing this. So one of them that we're working on is modularity. So we need to be able to offer different options to builders. I think distributions and bottling every user into one box is problematic. The IDO launchpads do this. They go, everyone has to launch in this manner. And that doesn't necessarily do a few things. It doesn't tie users to community members necessarily. Like sometimes user bases, a user of a product and a community member is different. The people that speculate in the token. And like, having the right tools to tie those together is important. So like mechanisms like lock drops are great for this, right? Like how do you tie a user with a community member so you're distributing tokens to the people that are actually the users in the platform? Things like, for example, we're working on a module at the moment for launch pools. Launch pools are great for ecosystem bootstrapping. Let's say you're launching a Celestia roll-up, right? You want that to be like, and you want to do an airdrop, but maybe you're not getting any fundraising by airdrops, or maybe you have to raise from VCs at a really high valuation. So maybe like a way to bootstrap these is actually by doing launch pools where people are committing their TR over a period of time to get airdrops in these. It's kind of like an airdrop, but it's a way of doing that and actually getting liquidity. So modularity is having different mechanisms so that we can bootstrap things. So for example, at the moment we're doing node sales, right? We've been doing a few node sales. So that's been a way of like protocols distributing tokens and also decentralizing the network. So having different tools for node sales is also a way that we can kind of capture that part of the market around distribution and having these different modules. So I think modularity is one really key piece. Having the different platforms. And I think the third one, it's probably the most important one that isn't out yet, but we're working on, is reputation scoring. So this is almost like, when you deal with this airdrop situation, it's like, how do you know who to give better access to? How do you align incentives within the ecosystem to ensure that you're like distributing to either the right people or that you're distributing to like users that aren't going to just dump your token and disappear? It's a really bad issue, but we actually got a superpower. Like we've got on-chain data, which is like super, super powerful to be able to see like, well, if you've done 5 airdrops and this class of users have dumped every single airdrop aggressively, like, maybe stop airdropping to these users, right? Like maybe start airdropping to users that are like staking your token and using your token, but not necessarily in the sense like it's like take this activity and then get rewarded, but more so looking at like the wallet as a picture and going like, hey, even without like these incentives, this user has been like a pretty good user. It's been shown to have good history. So how about like we start like giving better points or better access to these. And so for us, I think a key part of this is like curating audiences to get better projects to launch, but then also like, creating this kind of flywheel effect around, quality users, both on-chain and off-chain, building reputation scores, which give people kind of a leg up that allow them to kind of earn their way into access and opportunities, which then to us going to the builders, like these guys, this group of people are going to be better users. So that's, really exciting. There's a couple of protocols we're working with currently to facilitate this, like bonus block for on-chain stuff, and there's a couple for off-chain. And it's going to be rolled out in stages. I don't think we perfect this solution from day one, but start to roll that out. I think the last one, I know I mentioned a lot of solutions, is starting, and I think the reputation scores can help to reduce reliance sometimes on predatory actors, so like KOLs and things. If we can bake these into the reputation scoring and the way that we can showcase people bringing value, maybe these like KOL rounds can start to kind of diminish, or these reliances of this kind of stuff. And the last one, we also built a governance aggregator called Equinox, and the goal of that is to actually funnel liquidity into the ecosystem. So it's a convex style platform built on top of Astroport. The goal is, even though it's part of the launch ecosystem, because the goal is like, if we're doing launches, we're attracting good builders, we're attracting good users, we then need to bring liquidity incentives into the ecosystem. And how do we facilitate this? Well, how do we bring tools that actually help to bring liquidity into the ecosystem and facilitate that? So this whole picture is one of the ways that we're looking around this. But I think the evolution will be like, how do we build out the community strong enough so that we can bootstrap projects without relying as much on VCs or relying less on these predatory actors? How do we get more power by relying less on centralized exchanges? Well, we need to build a strong layer first. You can't do this. Like, we can't just go, hey, we're going to just rely on duality and on-chain order books and just say no to sexes. We really need to build the tools and the incentive layers to be able to attract users to create. Yeah. We need to build an alternative system. And this is the thing with Launchpads. We can't just come in and like go, we're changing the game. We need to build an alternative model for people to plug into. And this is why this takes time, because it's not as simple as like, we've got the solution, we've fixed everything. We actually have to build the foundations of a new model and a new way of doing things to be able to move people from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. So it's not easy. It's a hard task.
That's a whole lot of steps to take and a whole lot of tech to develop, right? So I'm wondering, like, what are your operations in the company look like? Because there are tons of stakeholders that you've just named, from exchanges to projects to VCs to the audiences. You've mentioned community building several times. So what does your week actually look like? Like which parts do you need to focus on most now to get the ball rolling?
So our team's pretty big actually. We've got 25 team members, so it's actually pretty big. Like, we have tech, so we've got a whole number of product owners. We're about to hire a new product manager, so we're hunting for a new product manager at the moment. We have, I think, 3 smart contract devs. Currently, we've got 4 front-end devs. We're going to cut that down a little bit as well. Product owner, smart contract devs, UI UX designer. So we're pretty stacked on that side. BD is also something that's been growing. So we've had Sam as head of BD. We've had head analyst, brought on a new analyst, as well as a BD/KOL manager, COO, and operations manager. So that's the biggest gap I think that we've had, is operations has been something we've really had to lock tight, because there's just so many moving pieces at once that we're really having to stack up the operations side of, like, when you're working with a partner and you're supporting a partner, you're like literally taking their launch and going like, here's a month out, like this is what we're going to do to support marketing and do this sort of stuff. So you've got to align their campaigns, and you might be doing this for 3 or 4 projects at once. So marketing has to be aligned. There's just so many like onboarding steps and things moving at once. So we've got like the marketing team, we've got a couple members in marketing, we've got community mods, and then there's me, and we work like very long hours. I mean, the whole team works like crazy. I mean, me, the BD, the marketing, everyone works like 17 hours a day, like ridiculous hours, because there's just so much to do. Like, I'm always got a list of things that I need to do. Like, I'm working on product, I'm working on BD, I'm working on marketing, running campaigns, doing kind of admin, new narrative stuff, working on ops side. So there's just so many things on a daily basis that have to get covered. I sometimes I'm shocked how much we actually have to go through all the time.
So in order to sort of build a mental model of this, is it fair to say that on one leg, sort of you guys are developing the tech and building out those components that you need, and the other leg is sort of starts at onboarding projects, and then they get handed off to like different parts of the company, like, hey, it's time to think about tokenomics. Now let's do the campaign. So there's like an inbound pipeline, and then the company takes over and sort of helps take the process to the basis.
So we have a few things. There's a few areas of BD. You've got like deal flow activation, which is a really powerful one, because like there's two ways to get deals. You can go out and hunt and go and get deals in that way. You can have inbound deals, which do come in as well. And then you also have deal flow. Deal flow is one of the biggest sources of getting deals in, which is like specific structures with VCs, validators, KOLs, advisors, which is a relationship game. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and we have to activate, like keep them active. We share deals. It's pretty hectic, actually. It's like we're sharing decks, sharing deals, getting deals in, getting introduction to those deals, and then funneling them through the DD process, which is like meeting with them, then funneling them into analysis, into stage 1 and stage 2 of DD, and then seeing, okay, these guys are promising. They've got this. They need help with this, and this. Then that gets pushed to Sam and then to myself, which come in and help with tokenomics. We look at the marketing campaigns. We look at all this sort of stuff, what introductions they need. There might be fundraising, so we introduce to fundraising partners, like VCs, all sorts of stuff. And then this comes over to marketing as well. We look at kind of like their playbook and their campaigns. And we have our own playbooks for marketing as well, which is like, we've got our own marketing, but then we got the marketing for the projects coming through as well, which is like, okay, cool. We're going to need to run this campaign here. We're going to need to do this social mining campaign. We're going to need to do an AMA here. We're going to need to do this. We're going to do a KOL. Sometimes we do KOL rounds. We want to reduce reliance on KOL rounds, but we still do those as well. We have a list of over 400 KOLs. So then we plug that into our KOL manager. The KOL manager goes out and says, okay, we've got these KOLs, gauges interest, does like a 300K round or something for KOLs. In that instance, and so that comes in through that, right? And then there's all the operations of launching that goes over to some part of tech as well. We have to so there's a lot that goes on. Listing on the platform, the content writers have to go in, create content, get it, it's a lot that goes on just in that part, and that's just the operational part of maintaining launches. Then you're like building products, running our own campaigns, building our own community, all this sort of stuff is a whole other section of Eclipse.
So how many IDOs can you sort of do, I don't know, per month or per year? Like how many are you planning to do in 2024?
In a sane level, or
like? I think so the sane level, and then what you're actually planning.
I think like we don't want to really go over 2 or 3 a month max, at least in the permission side of things. I think the reason for that is like number of quality deals, and also just the operations sides of ensuring that we can support the partners properly. Right. Like it's really hard if you've got so many partners at once and you can't properly support them. Like we really, focus our strengths on supporting partners and building up reputation. If we want to build the new system that we need to build up reputation. We need to build up like a really strong standing, aligning with right partners, getting better deals. And part of that is like really, really supporting the people that we work with. So we can't do that too much. I think this will scale up with a permissionless pad. The idea is as the permissionless pad comes out, then we can actually like scale up the number of launches, because that can be done like in a more decentralized way than just
more low touch.
More low touch. Yeah, for sure. And some projects need more help than others, but 2 to 3 a month is sort of the max that we can handle.
How long do projects go? How long does it take for a project to run through the pipeline, right? If I imagine I'm like a new project, we just passed DD, and you said, okay, we're going to work with you guys. Let's call that day 1. How long are we engaging together? Because when you say 2 or 3 a month, like that might mean you have, if it takes 2 months, then you have 4 to 6 in parallel, like some late stages, some early stages going on at the same time. Right?
It's quite interesting. Like I think from like time to like engagement to launch, we like to have a month. We can do it shorter. It just depends on the project stage, because some projects might be like they've already run their marketing, they've got traction, they've got all this stuff lined up, and then they're coming to us and they want to use us, and they don't need as much like support, and maybe they're kind of right there. And some projects are really early and they're like got a killer product, but they've got no community or they're not positioned well. And so that's much more of a lift. And so we have to then weigh up like, how do we engage this? Do we stay light touch and give them the early strategy and then let them kind of keep an eye on them until they kind of build up to the stage that they need to? The heavy lift is hard for us to be too heavy with the lift because it's quite a lot of work. But I think it's like, what we're seeing a lot, we see a lot of projects that think they're going to launch in like March and then they delay to May and then June. So that does happen as well, where we think it's maybe going to be a month and then the market changes or they're not ready to launch. They always overestimate when they think they're going to launch. And so that's also something we've got to factor in. Like we might have 8 projects in the go, and then half of them are still not launching, and we're still kind of going down the pipeline, and maybe we have one launch a month.
Right,
So that's one thing. And you see this in Cosmos a lot as well. Like Cosmos moves a lot slower, I think, in terms of an ecosystem than some others. So that also makes it challenging, where you might have a chain that's been developing for ages, and their TGE might be in a year. You just don't know when it's going to be. So, yeah.
Right. What kind of deals do you have with the projects that run through your pipeline? How can I imagine like the deal is structured? Like when I work with you guys, let's say I have a project. Is this like an equity thing? Do you get a token allocation? How does that? What do these guys? What should they expect?
Yeah, so we haven't been really heavy on that. Like, partly this phase for us is about building up reputation, right? Like, the idea is like, how do we build up testimonials? How do we build up reputation? We don't want to be a predatory actor. Like, that's something that we really want to position. Like, we need to have a sustainable business model. But the goal for us is to build a hub that allows us to like add value first and then monetize around the pad, but then also be in a better position where the value is like, hey, this is the value that we're willing to pay for. So if we bring on an advisory, I don't want to go to projects and be like, give us like a whole bunch of advisory tokens and we're going to add minimal value. That's the last thing we want to do. So the way that we structure the deals currently has been like, we take a percentage of the raise in the launch, and it ranges between like 5 and 7%, depending on the project, depending on a few things. Half tokens, half cash is what we've kind of done. And then we take also like cuts of like, if we helped a project raise like $1 million in direct like referrals. So we do take a cut as well of the referrals that we help to make with VCs and investors. So that's kind of the way that we kind of have brought in cash and done stuff. Like we've taken a cut like on node sales. There's typically like commissions and kickbacks, and it's not huge. Like we're still actually making decent revenue from that when we're doing it. But it's not like the business model in its like, I guess, final state. Like the way that I see monetization around this is like things like Equinox is building like the products and the systems around to monetize the ecosystem, drive value into the users and the stakers and the holders of the ecosystem. So like as we build up, maybe we get in a bit better position to get airdrops for the users in the ecosystem, or ways that we can kind of like, maybe it's like, hey, cool, we'll do this, but maybe drop some tokens into our community pool, which will then kind of be used to support the ecosystem. So that's the way that I kind of look at it. But then there might be opportunities for like further touch stuff as we get to a certain scale where maybe it's not sustainable for us to do this heavy touch stuff. We maybe can go, hey, we might have token deals for like advisory or incubation or things like that. But it's quite a heavy lift, and so we haven't really gone to that yet. But the idea is like, let's add value first. Let's build the reputation, the testimonials. Let's really build up a standing, and then really dig more into the monetization aspect. So it's kind of finding this fine balance where
Makes sense.
Still, yeah.
What ecosystems are you guys sort of planning to hit, right? I mean, now you're active in the Cosmos ecosystem. Like, are you planning to expand elsewhere? Are there, some plans you guys already have in place, or is this something you're thinking about?
It's a really good question, actually. Like, you'll find that we're actually multi-chain in many ways. Like, we're supporting launches across multiple ecosystems. And this has kind of messed with people a little bit because our branding on our website has been Cosmos, and then we're launching projects in other chains. Our plans is actually to stay with our home base on Neutron and stay in Cosmos, because I think there's a lot of strategic long-term stuff for us right here. But I think the goal for us is to be agnostic, but do it from Cosmos. So how do we do launches across like different ecosystems, but create a seamless onboarding experience where users are coming and they're participating, but it's not really a huge lift of like, hey, I have to have a hub on every different chain that we're launching, because we can actually do this through bridges and stuff where we collect funds and we do stuff on Neutron and Cosmos, but we then bridge and then the liquidity pools elsewhere. The reason for that is we don't want to have kind of our posts on multiple chains and making people jump between different like chains every time they need to participate. We want to nestle our home, and then we want to really support Neutron and Cosmos as ecosystems to really create like a lot of boots on the ground within this ecosystem. So even though we'll be agnostic, like how do we help to seed an ecosystem? Like how do we help to really like build out the community in one place? And then projects will still come to launch because the community is strong, but like still our collection will still be in Neutron. But we may not need to communicate that. Like long term, people might not even need to know what chain it's on. It's just kind of going to be a launch hub that launches quality projects. But we don't want to have to maintain code base across like multiple different chains and code base languages and things.
It feels like some of the really heaviest lift is actually attracting and building a community of people who will sort of support these projects, right, on the Launchpad. So which ecosystems like have you been successful in sort of like building, or at least are in the initial stages of building the community? Where is it, when you say community, where is it concentrated? Does it live on Discord? Does it live on X? Like, so what are you talking about when you say?
It's a bit of everything, actually. It's interesting enough. We found Arbitrum was very interesting for us. So we've got a very distributed community. It's quite interesting, actually, because we have a whole range of different users that are kind of pop up out of nowhere. It's like we have these users that come from node sales and these users that come from Arbitrum. We got some Cosmos users, and then we got some more silent community that always participate. And now with Equinox, we're starting to get a lot of Astroport users as well, because there's that whole subset of the Astro Wars and everything going on. So we kind of got this like interesting thing. I think what we haven't done as well in recent stages is consolidating the story into like a very concise message, which is something that we're actually about to kind of re-release. Like everything I'm talking about now, it's sprinkled through our messaging, but it's not consolidated very well. So it's kind of a little bit of, sort of around the shop, but we're actually consolidating this very much into a very powerful story that tells the whole picture of everything that we're doing in a consolidated manner. So that's really important for us in terms of like rallying people around this cause. But the users are, I would say the users are like, we've got retail users, we've got DeFi users, we've got users from Arbitrum, users from Cosmos. They're a bit fractured, but we'll get a bit of a picture, like soon we'll get a much better picture of with the narratives of who sticks to that. And then the next stage is like reputation scoring also helps to give us some intel around, okay, cool, Launchpad users might not work well. You know, the traditional Launchpad users might not work well in that system because, you know, essentially they're going to get cut out because if they're flipping all the time and they're not good long-term users, then they're going to have issues. But there's a whole subset of users. Right. There's a whole subset of users that want to participate in launches that I wouldn't say are Launchpad users. That sort of like don't get attached to these platforms because of their reputation. So yeah, there's very much a lot of like undercurrents going, and we're still doing a lot of research and stuff like that, and putting our finger on exactly like the areas in which the best users come from and things like that. So it's quite an interesting mission.
Have you managed to connect these communities from various chains? Like it always feels when I talk to people at conferences, you know, there's still at least some tribalism in crypto. Like, you know, I'm an Arbitrum, I believe Arbitrum and what's Cosmos? Like and the other way, like Cosmos, like app chains are the way, and you know, what are you guys doing with these centralized L2s? Are you guys managing to like bridge this? Is there one place where these communities can let's talk and then just, you know, just support these projects they like?
Well, we bridged a lot of users into Cosmos. Like we bridged a lot of users into Neutron. People don't realize how many users we actually brought to Neutron. But like when we did our own launch in December, I think we had like, I think it was like 17,000 users or something. And like, it was insane how many users actually bridged into Neutron from like their first exposure, from Arbitrum, from everywhere. So with their first Leap wallet set up, their first Capital wallet set up, and some actually started to explore the Cosmos. And it was a shame that it kind of died off a bit, because I was getting these like hardcore ETH maxis that were exploring the Cosmos ecosystem and making content about Mars protocol and really like exploring osmosis. And like Celestia kind of happened at the same time and everything, but it was kind of cool. I was like, wow. But I don't think we've really created, we haven't solidified the medium yet. Like I'd say our community is agnostic, but we do need tribes a little bit. I think tribalism is a part of community, and you don't want to have too much tribalism, but it's also important. If you have complete agnostic communities, they become more mercenary. So that's always a challenge, I think, when we build this agnostic launchpad. Like if our community is completely agnostic, and this is why I talked about focusing on Neutron and Cosmos, because they're too agnostic, then the loyalty drops off. Maybe they're kind of experimental guys that like to use a lot of platforms. That's great. But you will find like more speculators hunting between ecosystem, finding flips, rather than guys that actually come in and use the DEX and use the money market and use all the opportunities inside of the ecosystem. So it's quite challenging to think through this of like, we almost need to handle this, like have the one core community, and then we almost need like satellite communities, I think, that are focused on specific ecosystems, that we might have a season focused on one ecosystem, kind of like how Outlier Ventures does it. So I'm still trying to work out how
this sort of makes sense. Like, so they'll be the ones bringing in a project from their ecosystems and promoting it, you know, and saying, like, you know, we like this, it's an Arbitrum, that's our home base.
It's still something I haven't fully worked out. I know there's the mental model there that I know that will come up as an issue, but we haven't fully crossed that yet. But I know that the core community is going to need to be a key piece. That's going to need to be very... but do you know what? These core community may be aligned in the right ways. Like they might be participating in launches from another ecosystem and still go and use it. But it also creates barriers of like, if these guys become too tribalistic, then they may not go and use this other ecosystem as much. So it's kind of challenging with that kind of mental model.
Well, that's a super important problem to solve. I think connecting more of crypto is something. I do understand that you need, you need those communities that are committed to specific sort of routes forward and help explore those, right? But then, building a cross community system like that, it sounds pretty awesome.
Well, you need the speculators. You do need the speculators as well. You're going to get community members that are there to buy tokens, and they're there to make money. But the question is, what are the incentive timeframes for these guys? That's the biggest question. I don't think there's anything wrong with speculators. Like every community is going to have people that hold the token that aren't users, or they're there for the vibes, or they're there for the community. There's nothing wrong with that, right? The question is, what are these guys' mental model and incentives around participating? Are they looking at there's 30% TG unlock on this sale. I need to flip this as soon as possible and make all my money back and then move on to the next opportunity. And if they're looking at it that way, right, and everything becomes about the short term, this huge game theory, negative game theory happens where everybody's selling their tokens as quick as possible and getting out and dumping the price. And it's a flip as opposed to like, hey, this is a long-term project. It's been strongly vetted. It's powerful. Let's build a community that's kind of believes long-term in the project. And then everybody's kind of like, involved in this long-term until maybe it gets product market fit and then the token takes off long-term and all the speculators make way more money and way more liquidity than they would just chasing low liquidity flips, right? It's a different perspective. And it's risky as well. Because
the holy grail would be to align this with tech, right? To use tech to have a lock drop, let's say, to align this sort of the view of these speculators. They're going in already knowing the token will be locked for a while, and they need to make the call whether they want to ride with the project
or incentivizing the right behavior of saying like this is what we're looking for. But like people that invest in coinless projects have a longer time frame than people that invest in like other Launchpad projects, because there's so many things that come into it, like the quality of the deals and the like. Everything around it is a different time horizon mostly. And so for us, like the ICO days was a different time horizon to the days of the short-term flipper. So it's just, you got to find there's people out there that are willing to wait longer and their expectations are going to be different because they're looking at the reward is longer, right? As opposed to short-term like gratification. Sure, there's still the short-term focus, but incentives, finding the right people and then setting the right expectations, I think is going to be key to building this. And if you compromise on that and you start doing things against that ethos, that's where things start to fall apart.
Yeah, so here's to hoping you guys are focused on that golden path.
It's not easy. It's not easy, I tell you. But I think it's what everyone is asking for. So,
well, best of luck with that. So thanks very much for chatting today, Simon. It was super interesting. Love to hear about the internal ops that you guys, so the challenges that Launchpads are facing on the inside, and all of us see them from the outside. So, hope to see you here.
Well, most of them take shortcuts. Like most of them aren't doing DD properly, or they're not supporting well, and they're not doing stuff. So taking on those extra things is a lot harder, but a lot of them aren't doing that stuff as well. It's worth keeping in mind.
Fingers crossed. All right. Have a great Friday.
Thanks, Legend.